Okay, so we'll do something on Lag BaOmer, by the way, which is of course intrinsically connected to Tanya, because as we'll see later, I'll explain later that really Lag BaOmer is considered the day which began the process of the dissemination of the secrets of Torah. So that's very much connected. The idea of learning Tanya, the idea of having access to concepts that Tanya talks about and Hasidus talks about, is all goes back to what Rav Shimon Bar Yochai stood for. So it's good, but we'll understand a bit more in a second. Throughout the shir. So this is a talk of the Rebbe, which was actually said and then printed in Yiddish, but then they've translated into Hebrews, which I've given you. I thought it would be a bit easier than the Yiddish. How's your Yiddish, Lisa? No? Anyway, okay. So we'll just do the parts that are highlighted, because otherwise the whole thing is long. I'll do some of the stuff outside. So it starts like this: Yodua ta'am hasimcha b'Lag BaOmer. It's known the reason for celebration of Lag BaOmer. Now, before we actually say the reason that the Rebbe says, there are a number of reasons, as he brings in the footnotes. One of them being, for example, a famous reason that we know that during this time 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva passed away, and Lag BaOmer they stopped dying, right? Which explains the easing of the mourning, and it explains why we're a bit sort of lighter on Lag BaOmer, but doesn't explain the intense celebration of Lag BaOmer, right? And there are other reasons also. But the main reason, at least Kabbalistically, according to the Arizal and so on, is this. Lefi shebeyoyim zeh, on this day, hoisa histalkuso shel Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. On this day was the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, ubashas histalkus. And at the time of passing, and this is true for every tzaddik, for every person really, but particularly for tzaddikim, what happens is nichleles v'oyle lemaylo. When a tzaddik passes away, it says that on that day, everything that he did throughout his life comes together. V'oyle lemaylo kol ha'avoda, and all the avoda goes upwards, is elevated. V'ha'omal, and the tremendous effort sheha'adam omal ba'torah u'mitzvahs, all the effort that the person put into Torah and mitzvahs, kol yemei chayov, all the days of his life, right? So this is something that in Tanya it's explained, other places, that is true with every tzaddik, which is why, it's a concept which is explained in the inner essence of Torah, in other words, the pnimius of Torah, in the secrets of Torah, in Kabbalah, right? Because it's a very interesting thing. I'll just explain, I'll give a bit of introduction to this. If you look in halacha, yard sites are sometimes fast days. They're considered days where you have to actually be more restricted in terms of, even chas v'shalom, if one loses a parent, there is a concept brought in halacha. Not everyone agrees with it, but there's a concept brought in halacha that on the day of the yard site you don't go to a wedding, for example. You sort of partial mourning kind of thing, right? It's brought down that on the day of the 7th of Adar, Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. There was a custom people have, or some people still have a custom, to fast, right? And here suddenly we come to this thing, particularly since Kabbalah was taught, or Hasidus came into being. Not only Chabad Hasidus, all Hasidus, where yard sites of tzaddikim particularly are considered days of celebration. Now, why is that? Because there's two levels to a yard site: the external and the internal level, right? The superficial, not superficial, but the external level, and then what's really going on behind the scenes. In the revealed context of a yard site, it's a day of lacking. It's a day where you're reminded of the absence of the tzaddik, the absence of the person, right? And therefore, obviously, it's a day that's not a celebratory day at all, right? It's where the absence is much more emphasized. However, what pnimius haTorah, I'm going to use this term pnimius haTorah in one time, so just understand it. Pnimius haTorah means the secrets of Torah, the internal part of Torah, which was once concealed and held secret from us, right? Completely. Until Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Only a very select few people had it. But
was revealed to Moshe Rabbeinu?
Yeah. So we have a principle in Yiddishkeit that any part of Torah that was ever revealed throughout the ages, and there are different aspects of Torah which are revealed in different periods of time, were all given to Moshe Rabbeinu, all given at Sinai. Potentially at least, or the concepts were given, and the power to expand on it. The Gemara says, Kol shetalmid vosig osid lechadish, anything that any talmid, any student of Torah will innovate, was all given to Moshe Rabbeinu at Sinai. Now what does that mean? It's an interesting thing, because on the one hand it calls it lechadish, it says it's innovation, it's chidush, and yet it says it was given to Moshe Rabbeinu at Sinai. So a little bit it's like let me think of it like this, think of it like a seed of a tree, right? The entire tree is in the seed. The tree can, no detail of the tree can grow unless it's in the DNA of the seed. Correct? So the seed was given to Moshe Rabbeinu. Not all of it was revealed, not all of it was expanded upon. Even in halacha of Torah, there are many halacha part, Torah Shabbat Peh, the oral part of Torah, is an ever-evolving thing. There are more and more aspects of Torah that are revealed with time. Even in halachic analysis, because what part of the oral Torah that Hashem gave Moshe Rabbeinu is that He gave us the tools of interpretation. He gave us the potential. So everything is, He gave us the seeds of Torah, right? So everything is there, it just needs to be revealed. So Kabbalah and Pnimius HaTorah is the same thing. Of course it was given to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu understood it and had it. But it was under lock and key. It was not revealed. Only to a very, very select few. And it became revealed more and more with time, as we'll soon see. So anyway, so when we talk about Pnimius HaTorah, it explains that the Pnimius, what is really happening, of course when a tzaddik passes away, it's a terrible thing. And with any tzaddik, even, and with any group of Jews, whether Hasidim or not, there will always be a day of tremendous sadness when it happens. But also at the same time, we understand that because in Kabbalah and in Zohar it says that when a person, a tzaddik particularly, when they come to the end of their life, everything they ever did, all the work that they put into Torah mitzvahs comes together, has an unbelievable elevation, and then in turn has an amazing impact on the world. And this re-happens every single yahrzeit. So it's an amazing day, right? Every yahrzeit there's an aliyah, and every day there's a tremendous light that comes into the world in the yahrzeit of a tzaddik. And therefore, since the advent of Kabbalah, but Chassidus particularly, following the line of Pnimius HaTorah, days of yahrzeit of tzaddikim actually become days. Yeah, you still feel a lack, obviously. I mean, Gimel Tammuz is coming up. It's 30 years. Of course, you feel the Golus, but still, we also understand that it's an amazing day, right? Now, with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, there are two things. First of all, if that's true with every tzaddik, how much more so with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, because we'll soon see what happened to him at the end of his life. Second of all, he specifically commanded, or instructed, I should say, or asked, that his day of passing should be a day of simcha, and that people should join in with him in his simcha. Why? What was his simcha? He says in the next paragraph, Lachain, he says, B'shas his talkusei shel Rashbi, at the time of the departure of Rashbi, Kishenis'ale be'ilui godel b'yoser, when Rashbi was elevated to an unbelievable level. He was an unbelievable neshama before, but on the day of his passing, he was upgraded, so to speak, to the most amazing level. And he said, Omar Oz, he said that he's now at the point that B'chad Ketira Iskatarna Be Achido Be Lehita, that with one knot I am now completely bound up with Hashem, one with Hashem, connected to Hashem, who is skashir b'hiskashrus nitzchis im HaKadosh Baruch Hu Chaya HaChaim, that he connected to Hashem in an eternal connection in the most unbelievable way. Right? He became sort of one with Hashem, so to speak, right? So if that's true with every tzaddik, that there's this elevation every time he passes away, and therefore that reactivates every yahrzeit, how much more so with Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, right? Just to give you a little insight, so we say that Rav Shimon Bar Yochai was the author of the Zohar. He didn't actually write the Zohar. He communicated the teachings of the Zohar, and it was written down by his Talmidim. Therefore, there are things about him, like stories about him, that are talked about him in the third person, like in the Zohar, right? So his histalkus, his departure from this world, is also described in the Zohar in the most amazing way. So first of all, he gathered together his inner circle of Talmidim. He said he's going to reveal things he hasn't revealed till now. It says that there was like this bright fire, this bright light around his house the entire day of Lag BaOmer. Which, by the way, is one of the reasons that we light bonfires on Lag BaOmer for that. And then he talked and he gave instructions that one should listen and one should write. And there was a whole seder, right? And then towards the end of the day, in some places written actually that really the sun didn't set. It was actually already the next day, but it was still Lag BaOmer because the sun actually didn't go down because of that. Anyway, whatever the case is, but towards the end of the day, he was saying, and he said a pasuk, and the pasuk had the word Chaim in it, and he stopped with the word Chaim, and he didn't talk anymore. And the Talmidim were a bit scared to look up because there was this bright light on his face also. And eventually I did, and he saw his neshama had left his body, and there was a smile on his face. That's how he passed away. Right? So it was big stuff. So therefore, can understand that when you ask that the aliyah, the elevation, and the infusion in the world, the divine infusion, the spiritual infusion that happens in the world on the day of Lag BaOmer is incredible. Right? And how do you access that? You access that by joining in with the celebration of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. By having a simcha, by participating in something to do with Lag BaOmer and so on. Okay. Now, to develop this idea and to understand what is the concept here. So the Rebbe is going to talk about what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai stood for, what type of neshama he was, and then we will, and then at the end you learn a lesson, like what do we do with that, right? Okay. So you go to the next part where it says Ne'emar b'Yerushalmi. It says in the Yerushalmi. Now I'll just give you a bit of a background here. What we learn in many places in Kabbalah and in Arizal and in Chassidus and so on is that Rashbi's neshama was head and shoulders above everyone else's. It was the most special neshama, right? In fact, I don't know if you know, there's the song that everyone sings on Lag BaOmer, Bar Yochai. You know, Bar Yochai. Yeah. So it was written by, I've forgotten exactly who his name was, but it was written by a great Makubal, a great Kabbalist, who wrote, and it's all about the greatness of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, like amazing shevachim, amazing praises about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And it says there, for example, one of the things it says there is that when Hashem said at the beginning of Bereshis, when he said, Na'aseh Adam, let us make man, he says that was all about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The fulfillment of Na'aseh Adam was about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Anyway, like amazing things. Okay. However, his greatness was so great that it was hard even to be appreciated, even by people in his generation, as we'll see from the next story. So it says like this: Ne'emar b'Yerushalmi, right? It says in Yerushalmi, Ki b'sha'ah shehismich Rabbi Akiva es Talmidov. When Rabbi Akiva gave smicha to his Talmidim, he formally gave them smicha. Now, what are we talking about here? Just the background. We know that 24,000 of Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim passed away. 5 were left. Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda, I think, right? And a few, with 5. Rabbi Akiva called them together. He gave them smicha and instructed them to spread Torah to the whole world. Which is what happened, right? You have to understand, one of the great tragedies of the 24,000 Talmidim Rabbi Akiva passing away is, the Gemara says, V'hoya ha'olam shomem. The world was desolate. There was a real risk and a threat of the chain of Torah disappearing. Which obviously can't happen, because Torah is important, but is eternal. But it seemed like there was a tremendous threat. And then Rabbi Akiva took these 5 Talmidim and charged them with the mission of continuing the chain, and the Gemara says that the world became filled with light of Torah again from these 5 Talmidim. Rabbi Meir was one of them, a great Tana. These were all Tanoim, right? You understand the context? Historically, when they lived around, these old people lived around the year 100, roughly around there, right? Somewhere around in the vicinity, right? In the times of the Mishnah, basically, right? So Rabbi Akiva gathered together these 5 Talmidim, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Shimon, and Omar, and he said, Yeshiv Reb Meir Tchila, next page. Let Reb Meir sit first. He should sit in front. Right? Niskarma mupnei Reb Shimon. Now Reb Shimon was very well aware, self-aware of his own greatness, and he was a bit surprised. His face fell, like, did he do something wrong, whatever, like that. Because he was clearly the head. Amalei Rabbi Akiva said to him, Dayoch, it's enough. Sha'ani, Rabbi Akiva sensed his unease, and he said to him, Dayoch, it's enough. Sha'ani u'boiracho makirin koichacho. It's enough that me and your Creator know your strength. Meaning, Koloimar, Shekoichoi shel Rashbi, that the power of Rashbi, Hoyokoi Godel was so amazingly great, Achafilu Talmidei Rabbi Akiva lo hikiru. It was so transcendent, it was so great that even the Talmidim Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shimon's own colleagues, couldn't appreciate and fully understand his greatness. Therefore, in this world, Rabbi Meir kind of was the head. However, really, Rabbi Shimon's greatness was way, way beyond, and it was but too high, too lofty to be properly appreciated and understood. Go to the next highlighted piece. The fees there, according to this. Shafilu b'chayim chayusay ba'al modein hoyer Rashbi. If when Rashbi in this world, right, in this world, when he was alive, he was be'ein aroich na'le mibnei doiroi. He was infinitely greater than his generation. Hare Muvan is understood that kama hoysa gedoyla ali Yosebe mistalkusa. You can imagine how great he became on the day when he passed away. Right? Yeah, you understand? So this was when they were alive. Right? So you can imagine how great it is on the day that he said he was elevated to a much greater level. It just became completely transcendent. V'lechura, that begs a question. The question is, Hareho aliyah v'simcha shel Lag BaOmer. That means the elevation and the joy of Lag BaOmer. He naili smoid is so lofty. Miliyos lo shachs lacherim. Surely it's greater than having a connection to anyone else. In other words, the basic question is, if it's so high, what connection do we have to it? What's going to do with us? It's nice, great thing, great Tanya, but totally not in anyone's league. I mean, he wasn't even in Meir's league, so you can imagine how that was even on the day that he passed away. So you can imagine in terms of us, we don't, it's not like, someone's great, but we have a connection to it. We're not as great, but we have a connection of it. We don't even have any connection to it. It's infinitely greater than us. Yet it is clear that everyone has a connection to the Simcha of Lag BaOmer. Why? From the following story. The Rebbe told the story many times. Bram Mesupar, however, there's a story which is written in the writings of the Arizal, or after the Arizal, but it's about the Arizal. Yeah, it's in Eitz Chaim. It's the Arizal himself didn't write. The Arizal, by the way, was a continuation of Rashbi, right? The Rashbi began the process of revealing Pnimiyas HaTorah through the Zohar, and it became a bit more. But really, it still stayed pretty. The journey began on Lag BaOmer. That's where it began. That's why Lag BaOmer is such a high day. It's credited with the beginning of the revelation of Pnimiyas HaTorah. But then the Arizal was the one who expanded it much more and made schools of Kabbalah and so on. And the Arizal said, "Mitzvah legalo zeis hachochma." It's a mitzvah to reveal this wisdom. And then the Baal Shem Tov took much further, and Chassidus even further, and so on and so forth till today. Right? Today it's very accessible and it's very wide. The Pnimiyas HaTorah in different forms. Today it's manifested in the teachings of Chassidus, but it's still coming back to the original Zohar and the revelation of Pnimiyas HaTorah. By the way, the Arizal also was an unbelievable neshama, by the way. The Arizal had an unbelievable impact on Yiddishkeit. There's so many things people do that they don't even know that it comes from the Arizal, right? And the Kabbalists of his time. And what's so amazing is, I don't know if you know this, the Arizal lived about 400-500 years ago. The Arizal himself was a very short-lived experience. First of all, Arizal passed away when he was 36. And he was quite hidden. He didn't even live in Israel before the end of his life. Excuse me. The Arizal moved to Eretz Yisrael. The whole Arizal was 2-3 years at the end when he connected with Rabbi Chaim Vital, who was his Talmud, and he had Talmidim, and the whole the explosion of the Arizal was about for 2-3 years, the whole thing. And he did amazing things, also unbelievable stuff. Anyway, so he didn't really write anything, the Arizal. What we refer to today as the writings of the Arizal was written mainly by Rabbi Chaim Vital, his main Talmud, and so on. Okay. So, Rabbi Mesupar is told the story. What's the story there? Al echad mit talmidei Arizal. There was one of the disciples of the Arizal. Shehoyon noyeg loimer sat tefillah. He said a certain tefillah called Nachem Hashem. It's a tefillah of comfort. It's a tefillah that we say at Mincha on Tisha B'Av. This Talmud, however, was so bothered by the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, right, that he would say it every single day, B'Birkas HaMozin, in benching. He would add it in benching, because he was just so taken by the Churban, by the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, really bothered him. Umeloshen HaSipur Stamem, from the story, it seems, Shoyu Omer Nachem, he would say this tefillah B'Birkas HaMozin in benching, right? Mashma Shoyu Noyeg Loimer Nachem Gam Shabbos Yontiv. It seems he would say this Nachem even on Shabbos Yontiv. He would say it every day of the year. Then what happened was, when it came Lag BaOmer LeMeiron, they went to Meiron. This custom of going to Meiron on Lag BaOmer really came from the Arizal. And they went to Meiron, Lishtatech al Kever Rashbi, and they to be connected to sort of daven at the and celebrate at the grave of the Rashbi. And ve'omar gam oz nachem, and he said nachem. Well, again, hikbid Rashbi. The Rashbi was upset. He apparently revealed to the Arizal in a dream or something. Alamiras nachem shaloi shal Talmud Arizal. The Yom Simchase, he was upset that this Talmud said nachem on the day of his celebration shal Rashbi. At shakpeda yizikaloi, and Rashbi's being upset, called the kpeda, actually harmed this Talmud. He was punished in some way. Now, what's the pshat? Why was it okay for this Talmud to say Nachem even Shabbos Yom Tov, but it wasn't okay for him to say Lag BaOmer with the Simcha of Rashbi, right? And also, why? Like, what's wrong with Nachem? I mean, Rashbi also presumably wanted the Beis Hamikdash to be rebuilt, right? I mean, what's the problem? So he mentions the concept. He says like this: Habir Bazehu. The explanation is as follows: Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Hoysam Oisan HaNeshamas belonged to the League of Souls. There were certain Neshamas. There's a concept that for certain neshamas, they live in a different reality, and therefore the churban didn't affect them. Now, just explain that. Let's explain that for a second, right? Because the churban, we know, actually also only happens superficially. The soul of the, just like any churban, like any passing of a person, the churban, the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Only the physical structure of the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Right? The Beis Hamikdash is eternal. The soul of the Beis Hamikdash is eternal. So there's a spiritual Beis Hamikdash that was never destroyed. There's certain neshamas that live in that spiritual reality. For them, there was no destruction. There was no Churban Beis Hamikdash. Right? Certain great tzaddikim, certain rebbes. I'll tell you a fascinating thing where we saw this happen in real time. The Rebbe, it appears, who desperately wanted Mashiach and desperately wanted the Beis Hamikdash, it seems like it was for everyone else, because he also lived in that reality. How do we know this? Because on Tisha B'Av, one of the things that we do in terms of mourning on Tisha B'Av is we don't put on tefillin in the morning. In the morning MOR of Tisha B'Av, the morning of Tisha B'Av, we don't put on tefillin. We put on tefillin in the afternoon. However, there were certain great tzaddikim, I think who belonged to this league, who did put on tefillin. When the Rebbe would come down to davening on Tisha B'Av morning, he came with his towels. He came with our tefillin, as we do on Tisha B'Av, but he'd already davened, and he davened with tefillin. And it was very obvious, because during davening he didn't daven, he was learning. Right? Because certain tzaddikim put on tefillin on Tisha B'Av. Of course, they kept all the halachas of Tisha B'Av, because that's a Shulchan Aruch, but higher than the Churban. So the Rashbi was higher than the Churban, right? But Mela, therefore, ein mokim lahar goshes ha-Churban, there's no room to feel the Churban, the destruction, but Yom Simchas, the day of his Simcha. The Gilu Shalei, which also happens to be the day that he's revealed. Okay, now, what comes out of this like this? Nimtzah mizeh, comes out of this, Shnei Dvarim, two opposite things. Sheyeshnoi inyan Aleph, number one. It comes out, number one, Sheyeshnoi inyan b'Lag BaOmer, there's something about Lag BaOmer, She'einoi b'chol yoim echad, that is not there any other day of the year, even afilu b'Shabbos Yom Tov. Even Shabbos Yom Tov. The proof is, because this Talmud was never punished for saying Nachem on Shabbos and Yom Tov and Pesach and Shavuos, yet he was punished for saying a Lag BaOmer. Right? But the second thing we see, if you go to number base, the next highlight, Shesimchas hilula de Rashbi l'chol Yisrael. That of course the simcha of Rashbi somehow is connected to every yid. Afilu milimi she'einu nalem inyan ha'churban. Even for someone who's not above the churban, someone who is affected by the churban. Right? Like all of us, we're affected by the churban. We don't say Nachem every other day because it's the opposite reason, because we don't feel it enough. But we're certain affected by it, right? Even he was not supposed to express pain on the day of Lag BaOmer for the Churban, but to be besimcha. In other words, it's very nice to say that the reason that we don't say Nachem and Lag BaOmer is because Rashbi was higher than the Churban. That's very nice, but we're not higher than the Churban. But somehow, it is possible for us to tap into what Rashbi was, especially on Lag BaOmer. The Madrega of the Rashbi, which is so infinitely greater than us, yet somehow we're able to be affected by it. Doesn't mean we'll reach it, but we're able to be affected by it. We're able to connect to it somehow. Yeah? Okay. Now, this concept really leads into what the Rebbe wants to explain about what Rashbi was, and we see it in many different things. Rashbi, go to the next page. Koloimar. She'in yonoi shel Rashbi. The concept of Rashbi, actually, what is Rashbi? How do we define Rashbi? Hu lechaber shnei ktsoves, is to join two opposites. Lahamshich es hagavoya gavoya beyoser, to take something which is very transcendent, very high, afilu es hamadrega shobachad ketira is katarna, even a madrega of becoming one with Hashem, like on Lag BaOmer, this unbelievable bond that you have with Hashem, and to take that transcendent madrega ulahavi zois lemata mata beyoser, to bring it to the lowest levels. That's what Rashbi is. To connect the highest with the lowest. And by the way, he only brings a few examples in the Sikha, but actually there's a number of examples that are brought all over Chassidus. I'll give you just one very interesting thing, even in his Torah learning. You know that Rashbi was not the only Kabbalist in his time. There were other Kabbalists among the Tanoim. What's unique about the Rashbi? This concept. That in Rashbi's times there were Tanoim. First of all, besides being a Kabbalist, Rashbi also was an unbelievable Talmudist. Right? There's hardly a sugya, hardly a section in the whole of Shas where Rashbi is not mentioned. In terms of his halachic rulings, right? And analysis and all that. So he was an unbelievable Kabbalist, but at the same time he was an unbelievable Kabbalist, right? Pnimi Sator. Now, in his times there were many great Talmudists and there were many great Kabbalists. The difference is like this, that the Talmudists in his time, their emphasis was Talmud. They were also high madregas and Hashamas were special and they had some insight into Pnimi Sator, but it wasn't their thing, so to speak. It wasn't their emphasis, area of emphasis. The Kabbalists of his time, like Rabbi Nechunya ben Akona, for example, who was a known Kabbalist, we don't find him mentioned so much in Shas. Why? Once or twice, but not much. Why? Because his area was Kabbalah, his area was Pnimi Sator, and he didn't connect it to the revealed Torah. What's unique about the Rashbi? That it was an incredible Talmudist and an incredible Kabbalist. Why? Because he connected the two. Again, he brought the Pnimi Sator into the revealed part of Torah. So even in his Torah learning, we can see that concept happening, but we see it even more emphasized in other things. So, just skip the next part. I'll just give you a bit of context. You see, we'll start the paragraph which says V'im kol zeh. See that? The next, at the bottom over there, right? Let's give you a bit of background here. We know one of the things where we see Rab Shimon Bar Yochai's transcendence and almost detachment from the world is the fact that he was Toirasai Umanasai. He and learning Torah was just one. So much so that the Gemara says about him and others that were with him that they paskin that they're not even chayav to daven. There's a concept that someone who's Toirasai Umanasai, someone who's learning Torah is his entire occupation, entire life. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai would stop once in 30 days and daven. He didn't daven every day, right? Because Torah was his whole thing, right? He never daven. Okay. To the point where actually he disputed Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel said that the ideal way of living is to learn Torah, but also to work. Rabbi Shimon said, no, if you learn Torah the whole time, the work will be done for you. And the Gemara says a lot of people tried Rabbi Shmuel's method and it worked. A lot of people tried Rabbi Shimon's method and it didn't work. It worked for Rabbi Shimon, but it didn't work for everyone else. Okay. So just to give you a concept of who Rabbi Shimon was. Now, this concept of Torah learning, when Rabbi Shimon went into the cave, you know the story of the cave, right? He had to hide in the cave. When he went into the cave, it became even more intense. His exposure to Torah, because in the cave there was nothing else to do. There was he had water to drink and carobs to eat, but that's it. Him and his son learned Torah straight, right? Learned Torah, the depths of Torah, the most deepest part of Torah. Even the halachic part of Torah, the Gemara says that I think I forgot an exact number, but before he went into the cave, if he was asked a question, he would give 6 answers or something, and now he was able to give 24 answers. In other words, it was like a different person. Right? Now, the way it worked, just so you can understand the thing, that when Shimon was in the cave, he was in the cave for 12 years, and then there was a heavenly voice that the Roman emperor died and the decree was over, and etc. And he came out with his son Rabbi Lazar, but they couldn't tolerate the world. It becomes so worse, right? It says whatever they looked at was burnt up and all that. So they went back for a 13th year. Hashem said they should go back for a 13th year. Now, you'd imagine, right, that after the 13th year, it became even higher. So the world would be a bigger problem. Right? What happened was not like that. What happened was, so Rabbi Lazar was still very detached from the world at the end. Rabbi Lazar, when he came out, he couldn't understand, he couldn't relate to material things. When he saw a tree or he saw people working the field, it was like, so his eyes, his gaze destroyed them. Right? But not Rabbi Shimon. Rashbi, whatever, we'll see now. Let's have a look. Im kol zeh, after Rashbi atzmoi hayonoyeg tamid beseder, even Rashbi himself, the entire time he engaged in a routine. Shall his alus min ha'olam, elevated from the world. Shahoisoi turasoi umnasoi, Torah was his profession, Torah was his whole life. Hine, behold, when Rashbi and Rabbi Lazar, his son, came out from the cave, where they were there for 13 years, where we know when they were 12 years in the cave, especially in the 13th year, he became incredibly high in Torah, even more than before. Says the Gemara, which means any place, kol mokim, any place, Rabbi Lazar would punish, so to speak, about for activities like plowing and sowing the fields, because Rabbi Lazar could not tolerate that there are people that they leave the eternal life of Torah. They forsake the eternal life of Torah, and they involved and they engage in temporary life, which is plowing the field and working the field. Any place that he punished, have a Maser Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon healed. Reb Shimon fixed. Not only didn't have the same effect, on contrary, he healed, he fixed what Rabbi Lazar punished. The reason for that he did that, his Rabbi Lazar explained to Rabbi Lazar. He said, the world, it's sufficient just with me and you. In other words, it's not everyone is supposed to be like us. The Madrega we reached after the cave, that's okay for the world. Right? That's enough. The world has enough in that. In other words, what he's saying is, we are different neshamas. Now it's our job to connect the world as the world is to our Madrega, right? Now, let me just tell you a bit more outside. Not only that. Look at the next page. We'll just go to the left side, to the paragraph where it says Mosai. You see that? Mosai. So let me give you the background here. Rabbi Shimon did something else when he came out of the cave. And Dafka, when he came out of the cave, we'll soon see. He said to everyone, what needs fixing? What needs tikkun? He wants to do something to help. Right? What needs improvement in the world? The word tikkun really means, the word tikkun represents a concept where there's something broken. It means something missing and you have to fix. So what did they tell him? There was a problem where he lived, or the place, whatever, that a lot of the graves were not marked properly. Savers, they weren't clear where the graves were, right? The problem with that is that the Koyanim couldn't live there, right? Nowadays a Kohen goes where a Kohen goes because there's a cemetery, so we know where dead people are. But in those days, there were people buried in all different places, but it wasn't properly. Right? So Rav Shimon started attending to this. He started a campaign to clarify where the graves are and mark them properly and so on and so forth. Right? And he volunteered to do this. Says the Rebbe, an unbelievable thing. Here you see again this idea of the transcendence of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, which couldn't get higher, so to speak, connecting with something that is very low. right? Not only did Rav Shimon heal what Rabbi Lazar destroyed, but he volunteered to fix something, and he ended up, he didn't fix it when it was presented to him, he volunteered. He said, I want to fix something in the world, and what did he end up fixing? He ended up fixing something that's got to do with impurity, with tumah. The graves of people, which generate an impurity for kohanim, they can't go, and so on, right? Tumah, we know, what's tumah? Tumah is it's the part of the world that has an absence of kedusha. That's what makes it tomei, right? Wake up in the morning, we have a spirit of tumah in our hands. What does that mean? Because our neshama left throughout the night, so it attracted tumah, which goes away when the neshama comes back, except for the hands, right? In other words, whenever there's life or whenever there's kedusha and that departs, there's an absence that attracts impurity. Yeah? So here you have the big Rabbi Shimon, who was a special neshama that even Reb Meir couldn't relate to, who went into the cave, and in the cave he went from one madrega to the next, and he came out even higher than he was before. The 13th year particularly became amazingly great. And yeah, he's busy with things that are tumah. He's busy all the way down, things of impurity. Because that's what Rav Shimon is. He connects the highest to the lowest. Says the Rebbe like this, Masai, now comes the key here. Right? Masai, hoya yochel Rashbi lo redes ulasakin zayis. When was Rav Shimon able to come downwards and to fix this area of tumah? Dafke le'acharei shenis'aleh be'ilui achar ibul min haTorah. Only after he became higher and higher. The obvious question is, if Shimon was going to fix something in the world, why didn't he do it before he went into the cave? Right? Why didn't he fix the graves beforehand? The answer is because he wasn't high enough. He was too high, but not high enough. Why? Because we have it like this. When he went the 13th year in the cave, because he became so high, then he was able, not only was he able to come down and relate to the world, he was able even to fix the world, and even in the area of tumah. So this goes back to a concept which Chassidus talks about, this idea of the higher something goes, the lower it's able to come. Right? Let's explain that a bit. So, sometimes when a person is very lofty, they can't relate to something higher. Why? Because let's say you have ruchnis and gashmis, right? And a shoma and a guf, for example, a soul and a body, right? We learn in Chassidus that actually it's a very big wonder that the soul comes to the body. It's a big, how does it come? It's Hashem who's able to, so great that he could put the two together. Why? And the shoma is defined by something being very spiritual. A guf, the body is defined by something very mortal and spirit and physical, and defined and limited and finite. And the two don't really relate to each other, so they really don't join. Right? How can they join? When you have a power that's even greater than both, that's undefined. In other words, there was a time where Rashbi, before he went into the cave, was very, very, very high and lofty, but actually he was so high and lofty that he didn't relate to the world. Right? When he went into the cave and became even higher, he reached a place of such loftiness which was so undefined, so to speak, so infinite, that he can even bring it down to the lowest level. Yeah? And that's what Lag BaOmer is all about. Taking something very high and bringing it very low. So now that it's like this, turn over the page. Go to the thing where it says Vov. Sipurei Razal. So the Rebbe ends off like this. And he brings other examples also, which we're going into now. But, okay. Sipurei Razal. The stories of Chazal, on Hogas Rashbi, on the behavior of Rashbi. Gechol Sipurei HaTorah, like all the stories of Torah. Heim Hoira'o and Sinas Koyach Shekol HaDoirah Shel HaAchrav. They become an instruction and a guide for all the generations after, especially the later generations, our generation, that we were zoicha, we merited legilui shel pnimiyus haTorah, to the revelation of the pnimiyus haTorah, which ultimately goes back to Torasei shel Rashbi, to the Torah of the Rashbi. What do we have to do with it? So we have this amazing gift. We have Pnimius HaTorah. What are we supposed to do with it? We're supposed to bring it down very low. That's what we're supposed to do. Reveal it. And he makes the phrase here, Yesh Tzoyrech, we have a necessity, V'yofutzu ma'nosecha chutza, to spread the well springs to the outside. This comes from a pasuk, but it's also a dialogue. It's a famous story, right? The Baal Shem Tov once had in fact, I think it's told it was the first night of Rosh Hashanah. But the Baal Shem Tov used to have these things where Aliyah San Hashem, the Hashem would go up. He was still alive, but his Hashem would depart and journey in the higher spheres, the higher worlds, right? It used to happen by davening. So one time by Baal Shem Tov, his Hashem went very, very high up, and he came to the palace of Mashiach, it says, the Heichal of Mashiach, the way it is in the Olam Esalyonim. He encountered the spark of Mashiach. And he said to the Mashiach, Eimasai ka'osi mar, when is the master coming? When are you revealing yourself already, right? So Mashiach said, Lechashiyafutsu ma'inoisecha chutza, when the well springs of your teachings will spread forth to the outside, chutza, to the outside. By the way, that's a famous part of the story. If you read the story inside, you'll know that it's not so simple. There's a second part of the story, because the Baal Shem Tov wrote this story to his brother-in-law, and he said, "V'nitzta'arti, I had a lot of pain from this answer, because I knew it was going to take a long time." That's what he said. I knew that's going to take a long time, right? Obviously, the Baal Shem Tov started the process, or really even before, but the Arizal and the Rashbi, but to really have your futzah and asecha chutzah takes a long time. Now, what is this phrase, your futzah and asecha chutzah, that Rabbi used to speak about a lot? And by the way, in every generation, it meant something different. It meant like more and more and more. For example, in the time of the Alter Rebbe, for example, the Rebbe explained once, if Tal Baal Shem Tov means just exposing people to the emunah and the greatness of the neshama and Pnimius HaTorah. The Alter Rebbe took it a step further. What did the Alter Rebbe do? The Alter Rebbe also, his thing of Yefutzah and Asecha Chutzah, in the Alter Rebbe's time also, he started the whole process. He wanted to spread Chassidus, but it wasn't like today. There was no podcast in the Alter Rebbe's time. In fact, he didn't even allow simple people necessarily to learn it, to be affected by it, yes, but to actually study it not necessarily. So what was the revelation of the Alter Rebbe's times was that he allowed it to come down into the human brain. That in itself was already considered outside. Pnimius HaTorah by definition is something transcendent, it's not something intellectual. It's not like the revealed part of Torah. The greatness of Tanya, the greatness of Chabad Chassidus was that took something which is by definition transcends the human logic and brought it down to be understood. That's an amazing thing, right? And then with the other Rabbeim went down and down and more, and in the previous time they started printing in English. Today we are supposed to finish this job, we're supposed to take it to the end of the world. To make it accessible to everyone and everything and in every way. Correct? Because we've got to finish the job, we've got to bring Mashiach. But here we have to understand, and we're able to do it, the highest and come to the lowest. That's what the Rashbi taught us. That's the whole point of Lag Boimer. There's a process, but it happens. However, we need to know how it's supposed to happen, and this is the key of this sentence. Chutzah means, what does chutzah mean? Chutzah means something that is outside the realm of that holiness, of that revelation. Correct? Outside of the space of Kedusha altogether. And there's different levels of chutzah, right? We go, yeah? Spreading the well singers of Chassidus is in Banda is not the same as spreading Chassidus in the brains and the minds of the great Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe, right? We're exposed to a much greater chutzah today, right? The greatest, everything, whatever you can think of, that we're supposed to bring Pnimius HaTorah there, and whatever comes with Pnimius HaTorah, connection to Hashem, mitzvahs, and Torah, and so on. Right? So, however, chutzah in its extreme form, as it is today, is the complete opposite to the first word in the sentence. Mainosecha, your well springs. What's well springs? What's spring? Torah is compared to water, right? But water, as it leaves the spring, is really not the spring itself. It's the flow of the spring. It's one degree removed. Mainosecha is the essence, it's the purity of the Torah. Right? here's the challenge we have today. What the Rebbe always taught us, and in the context of Lag BaOmer, he says it also. He says, let's see. He says, Yesh tsoyrech, there's a necessity by your futzum and esecha chutza, to spread the well springs to the outside, which means kishur shnei haktzavos, the combination of two opposite extremes. Tzrichim lakachas, you have to take loirak mehanor, not only from the river, but loirak mimei hamaya, not even from the water of the river, of the spring. Ela mahamayon atzmo, you have to take from the spring itself, from the essence itself, from the undiluted, original, pure revelation of the deepest parts of Pnimiyas HaTorah. Ula hafitzoi ad lechutza, and to bring it down to chutza. Ad lechutza shubevadai chutza. To take it to the chutza that's like definitely a chutza. There's nothing more chutza like we have today. B'yachas leponim eze sheyeh. In other words, there's nothing more chutza in relation to the inside as whatever it'll be, right? Now, the ultimate combination of these two things is, of course, when Mashiach comes. But we have to do it as much as we can today. And what does this mean? It means like this. This is the gift of, I think this is why the Rebbe is speaking about it. It's today we're supposed to implement this. Like BINA message was always true, but it's most true today because we have the gift now in this generation to make the well springs accessible to everything and everyone. But it also comes with a challenge. It's a gift with an amazing challenge, which sometimes people forget about, right? That when we travel towards Chutzah, we whether figuratively speaking or physically speaking, whatever the case is, but when we go to Chutzah, the challenge is not to dilute what you're spreading there. Because then it's not the combination of two extremes. The combination of two extremes is when you don't dilute it, that the mayon itself, the spring itself, is going to the Chutzah. That you can be in Sydney and be a real Hasidic Jew. That's what it means. You can live by the Tanya. You can live by, right? That's what it means. If you say, well, I'm going into chutzah, so I'll dilute it. Now, the language might be different. Of course, it's got to be in language and in terminology that people can understand. That's fine, but it's got to be the real essence. And it's got to achieve the real essence. Right? As a side note, it doesn't say this in the Sikha. That's why I get really upset when people turn Tanya today, nowadays, into a self-help book, like a psychology book. It's not a psychology book. It might help you psychologically, perhaps, if you, depending what part of the journey you're on, but it's not a psychology book. Right? And use terminology that sort of turns it into a self-help book. Self-help is about self. Healthy self, but self. This is about not self. It's about transcending self. It's about coming one with Hashem. It's about bittul. It's a whole different thing. It's not nothing to do with right? Yeah, there are aspects of it which after they discovered even in the world, right? The brain rules the heart. Yeah, CBT discovered this, but it was already around in Tanya for centuries. But it's not the same thing. Yeah, the world says your brain can rule your heart, so you can make decisions, you can be self-disciplined, but it's all towards building a better self. Tanya, the brain can rule your heart to transcend self, right? I'm just giving you one example of thousands, but it's all about, you understand? Different thing altogether. So the point is that like BINA message is we've got to connect, and this is true in Torah, in mitzvahs, everything that we do. Like BINA message is the power to connect to something that's very high, and Rashbi gives us that gift, even though Rashbi's loftiness really has no connection to us, as we saw before. It's completely detached from anything that we can ever relate to. Yet he exposes us to it. He affects us with his kedusha, especially on Lag BaOmer, and then to do what he did, to take it down to the very, very lowest level. Okay.